Joining us now, NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Stuart Stevens served as Mitt Romney's chief strategist for his 2012 campaign. He's the senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, and Victoria de Francesco Soto, dean of the Clinton School of Public Service at the University of Arkansas and an MSNBC political analyst. So, Steve, what else does this new polling show us?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, you give the bottom line here is Trump in our poll now, 5-point advantage over Joe Biden. Compare that to the last time we took this survey. It was in November. We had Trump ahead of Biden by 2 points then. So from 2 to 5, significantly, I would say we've actually polled a Trump-Biden matchup 16 times, going all the way back to 2019 when Biden first got in the race. Biden led every single poll we took in 2019 and 2020, often by very large margins. We've now polled a potential 2024 matchup 4 times. This was the first time in November that Trump had the lead. This is the second time that Trump's had the lead, and at 5 points, it's the biggest lead he's seen over Biden in our poll since we've been polling a Trump-Biden matchup, again, going back to 2019. You also mentioned the approval rating. Obviously, Joe Biden's approval rating probably driving a lot of this. It's low. It's 37%, 60% on the disapproved side. Context for that 37%. Where were previous presidents seeking re-election at the same point? Start of the year, approval rating in our NBC poll. Here's the comparison. George W. Bush, 2004, he was at 54%. He got reelected. Barack Obama, 2012, he was at 49%. He got reelected. Donald Trump, 2020, he was at 46%. Didn't get reelected, obviously. And then Joe Biden right now at 37%. Only 2 other incumbents in their reelection year have polled at this number or below. It's George H.W. Bush in 1992, and it's Jimmy Carter in 1980. Take a look then as well. Some of the key groups we're keeping an eye on here. Young voters. There's been a lot of talk about young voters. Are they enthused in the way they were in 2020? They were a very important part of Joe Biden's coalition in 2020. Is there any sign that they're moving toward Trump? So you see here among 18 to 34-year-olds in our poll, we actually see the race there even at 42-42. We also see a very low level of engagement among those young voters. So one thing the Biden campaign is hoping for is also, we see those young voters don't have a very positive opinion of Biden, but they also don't of Trump. So one thing the Biden campaign is hoping for is that as the election draws near, this choice of Trump-Biden becomes clearer to young voters, and basically they get energized. They may not vote Biden per se, but they hold their nose and vote for him against Donald Trump. So that's one thing Democrats are looking for in that 18 to 34-year-old number. I think strikingly, the independents, Trump with a sizable advantage over Biden there. Look at how low, though, those numbers are total. That adds up to less than 80%. There's a lot of independents right now basically sending signs that they don't like either one of these choices, and they'd potentially at least maybe be open to a third option. That's something to watch in the months ahead. You break it down by race, white voters, Trump with a 17-point advantage, black voters, Biden with a 59-point advantage. Democrats want to see that number get higher. And then the Hispanic vote, been a major, major story. 2020, we saw that shift towards Trump. Question heading into 24, would it continue? So far in our polling, we've seen this would even be an improvement from 2020 for Donald Trump. He's actually 1 point ahead in our poll of Biden among Hispanic voters.
Steve, thank you very much. So, Victoria, President Biden easily won South Carolina's primary on Saturday. I think there was a lot that we could discern from that victory. What were your takeaways from it?
He continues to be strong with the Black Democratic base. In South Carolina, that's really where we see one of the core parts of the Democratic coalition come to the fore. But it's going to be also a question of what happens to the other core pieces of that Democratic coalition. So we know that the Hispanic coalition is one that the Democratic Party has been struggling with, where it was stronger in the last several election cycles, and also the youth voter. As Steve pointed out, it split almost evenly, and traditionally, Democrats did very well with young voters. Now, keep in mind that young voters don't necessarily turn out at the same rates as older voters, but we have been seeing an uptick in the rates of young voters. So in looking ahead to November, the Democratic coalition is going to have to make sure that they're both persuading those weaker sections of Hispanic voters leaning R and young voters voting R to get them back over, as well as mobilizing them, because it's not just, that who your preference is, but who you're going to actually go out and cast a ballot for.
Yeah, and Stuart, meanwhile, turning to Nevada, Axios reports that Trump's team is worried Nevada's plan to hold a primary 2 days before the caucuses could embarrass the former president, even though he's expected to win the state there. Is there any reason for them to be concerned? I mean, Haley is gaining some momentum. Enough in Nevada?
Well, look, when I worked in presidential campaigns, if you asked me if I was worried about, I would stop you at about, because I was worried about everything. That's kind of your job in a presidential campaign. Look, I think this race is over. I think that Nikki Haley's sort of a zombie candidate. She's not going to be the nominee. So I don't really think it matters. Ultimately, it's going to be about delegates, not about a news cycle. Super Tuesday, they're going to rack up a lot of delegates. Trump was going to rack up a lot of delegates. So, I think this is a Trump-Biden race. I just want to say one thing about these approval ratings. I don't believe historical norms are applicable here. We've never been in a situation in which 70% of the other party doesn't believe the president, incumbent president, is legal. So if you don't believe that the president is legal, what in the world can you tell that person to get them to vote for you or to have approval of you? Well, he stole the White House, but he's doing a good job on infrastructure. Or, how about that CHIPS bill? I think to a large degree, when you do these polls, you should screen and say, do you believe the president's a legally elected president, which of course he is. And if you say no, I would just throw him out of the poll because there's absolutely nothing that you can do to reach those voters.
True. And Stuart, but the fact is that there is probably very little that you're absolutely right, that the voter who sees himself as a Trump voter, you can tell to change their vote. But then there are the large group of independents, the large group of Democrats who may feel that they're not being listened to by the Democratic Party. It's those, Stuart, that I think people like Nikki Haley, who raised $16.5 million last month, over $11 million of that, she says, from grassroots, small donor donations. Is that enough for her not to be, as you call her, a zombie candidate?
Yeah, because she's not getting enough votes among Republicans. And ultimately, this race it's a Republican primary. It's going to be decided by Republican voters. So let's talk about Nikki Haley's voters. What's their second choice? It ain't Donald Trump. The vast majority of these Haley voters are either not going to vote or they're going to vote for Joe Biden or potentially a third party, which is why the third party is so dangerous for the Biden campaign. I think these polls are really showing not a choice between these two candidates yet. And we've had a couple of polls, one in New Hampshire, one in Pennsylvania, where Biden's approval rating was at 38, but he was winning by 9 points. I think you're going to see an increasing, historically different split between job approval and choice because we've never had an alternative like Donald Trump.
Stuart Stevens and Victoria Francesco Soto, thank you so very much.